At the end of my Thor vs. Thor video, I told you all that Superman vs. Thor will be coming out very soon, so what better way than to thank you all for 5,000 subscribers than a video you all have repeatedly asked for numerous upon numerous of times. The version of Superman I will be using will be post-crisis Superman and base Thor from current comics as well as recent comics, and I might do a surprise bonus round at the end of the video to find out who truly wins between the two in their entirety or strongest forms. However, with that being said, be sure to subscribe as it would mean a lot. And lastly, but most importantly, enjoy. Now, to find out how strong Superman is, we have to go over his fight with Golden Age Superman. Within Golden Age's Superman fights against post-crisis Superman, well, both of them rewrote timelines and shattered a space-time continuum. It was repeatedly stated that they would destroy each other's universes as well as timelines, and then eventually they started shattering the universe even after the statement was made. Now, normally this would be your standard Uni Plus or multiversal downplay, but universes do work differently within DC, but it's also inconsistent too, as like Marvel, each universe inherently spawns infinite other universes for every instant that they are existing. Every movement and every event, essentially, each event or non-event spawns a universe or another space-time, so essentially one universe inherently makes an infinite multiverse. So realistically, this one feat would be multiversal plus or fifth dimensional, but a base post-crisis Superman scales much higher. After being powered up by the Kismet, he defeated Imperiex Prime, who contains the power of and causes a 12 and third dimensional Big Bang. Even then, however, after achieving the Theta state, Superman fought and overwhelmed Domius, who created his own Phantom Zone. The Phantom Zone is described as a boundless dimensionless dimension between being and nothingness, and it resides within the sphere of gods, or the Skod sphere, described multiple times as a platonic archetypal world beyond the bleed, which contains all dimensions, which I'll get into, in which there are an infinite number of. Since Superman would be above Domius and by extension his Phantom Zone, he should scale above the concepts of both space and time as the Phantom Zone, God Sphere, Speed Force, and all other higher conceptual realms are as well. For those still in denial, Superman's own death was subdued by him and now views him as the embodiment of hope. As long as hope exists, Superman will exist, and when hope burns away, Superman will too, which was shown during the events of the Final Crisis crossover with Cosmic Armor Superman, which I'll get into later. Superman has also held back the likes of the Infinite Book. This Infinite Book feat gets downplayed, unfortunately, and people try to debunk it by saying the book has a definitive end when infinity can have an end / have a start. However, even within this, or even if we were to keep this in mind, we know things like countable infinities or Aleph nulls do exist within DC, which is shown through these stacked on universes within its cosmology that makes up the totality of the multiverse. From here, you'll get things like Outlier or Wink. However, this is just a prime feat from a prime character in DC Comics. The second debunk of the Infinite Book feat Superman had accomplished is that Ultraman did it alongside this Superman, who's quite literally just an evil variant of Superman that is relative to this aforementioned Superman. Keep in mind, this book contains every storyline and fate of an outerversal construct that is beyond space, time, and dimensions. With these feats and statements in mind, this would mean that Superman will now be on these outerversal levels of power, and nothing like Outlier or it's inconsistent would truly be the case via the reasons I listed prior. While lifting the Infinite Book, Superman and Ultraman would end up learning about the origin of the Cosmic Armor, which I'll get into later, but for those concerned with speed and abilities, keep in mind Superman was able to keep up and tag Zoom, who was stated to have speed that rivals his initially. Also keep in mind that this is the same Zoom and or Reverse Flash who ran to the 25th century and ran throughout multiple temporal dimensions, and he was going to run to the past to change their fight. Superman can also react to Barry Allen while he was running through time with Wally West, and also kept pace with Jay Garrick and Wally while they were chasing the Reverse Flash to the past. Finally, he can also move so fast he became fast enough to outrun temporal distortions in the past, present, and future. And as for abilities, Superman adapts to beasts that have initially adapted to his fighting style, and while utilizing the Theta state I mentioned prior, Superman told Domius he could attack to anything he could throw at him. Superman also has things such as non-physical interaction, as his heat vision can hit intangible beings and counter molecular phasing, limited power nullification, and he can cut off external sources of power using said heat vision, such as the Speed Force, and also has things such as invincibility and intangibility, being able to become intangible via vibration, like a speedster. However, Superman also has many resistances, such as being resistant to power absorption, as seen in his fight against the Hollow Men, survived matter destruction, and has a clear resistance to durability negation, as Superman survived the soul-targeting attacks from Etrigan and overcame the Hollow Men, draining his soul and hope with the help from Lois. Finally, Superman has resisted reality warping, existence erasure, and many more, as he resisted Mr. Mixie's realm without physics, gravity, and or reality, as well as fractured space-time itself. Mixie also attempted to erase Superman from all of reality and memory, but inevitably failed. Thor, before any of the godly amps he would get as an adult, and any of his feats during his time within the Avengers or the Yggdrasil, would perform a feat similar to that of the one Superman did, that being lifting an infinite book with literally infinite pages as just a kid. For some context, this was a Thor who merely stumbled upon that of the book and was able to lift it almost effortlessly. Thor after this would obviously age and perform many upon many feats that may or may not allow him to surpass his adversary within this video, Superman. However, before we continue though, we have to go over some basic yet important scaling for that of Thor, such as his hammer known as Mjolnir. Long ago, during the creation of Mjolnir, Odin would fight against the storm of all storms, known as the god Tempest. No, not me, this Tempest. Odin would then beat the god Tempest and would then create Mjolnir, which is how the hammer gets its thunder powers or powers from that of electricity. Tempest's wild nature also reincarnated into that of Mjolnir, with Odin not only having trouble taming it himself as he puts it, but claims no one, including himself, would be able to tame it unless worthy. This means being merely able to lift the hammer and or being worthy of Mjolnir in of itself is an impressive feat. However, as an adult, Thor scales to the Yggdrasil, as seen as when Thor shattered the root of the Yggdrasil and shook it and all of its branches every time he cried as a baby, which I'll get into. For more proof and consistency to back up this notion that Thor does scale to the Yggdrasil, we see that Thor fought Seth. Seth is the same person who was stated to be capable of destroying the Yggdrasil, and Thor beat her. Thor was also able to nullify Surtur's flames, which can burn the Yggdrasil and even all of reality. Thor was also able to push the Yggdrasil. The Yggdrasil, as I mentioned prior, exists on every plane of reality, spans the entire endless space-time, and has infinite planes of reality. Thor, even as a baby, was able to shake the Yggdrasil down to its roots and core. The Yggdrasil, mind you, has infinite universes and is stated to be essentially everything. This is further consistent, as in Marvel, like DC, one universe contains an infinite amount of universes, and every moment, each universe creates an infinite amount of universes and dimensions, which means one reality of Marvel is already an infinite multiversal scale because each moment creates an infinite universe. Pretty much, one universe has an infinite amount of universes which spawn constantly. Each universe also has a microverse. A microverse within Marvel Comics is a subatomic dimension that exists between all forms of matter in Marvel. This feat is actually greater than what is thought of or presented prior, as each universe contains an infinite number of variants on a 3D spectrum, being followed by an infinitely dimensional spectrum, something no mind in mankind could truly comprehend. However, unlike other verses where my skepticism would then start to show and apply, this is not simply just an infinite amount of three-dimensional dimensions, but however infinite amounts of mathematical dimensions, which including even transcendental realms. We know this to be true, as the universe, or rather multiverse, is mathematical in nature and in its essence ontologically, and is derived from a mathematical dimensional hierarchy. Its dimensionality, referring to the Marvel multiverse, which would include the Yggdrasil, is essentially infinite and grouped up into innumerable layers that make up the totality of the multiverse. We know this to be the case as the core of the Yggdrasil is the heart of everything, and this is further consistent as destroying the Yggdrasil would destroy quote-unquote all of creation. However, this is most likely only in reference to the Norse mythology within Marvel cosmology, and not the infinite finite Marvel cosmology or universe. Thor's body and divinity transcends dimensions and base. We know this is Thor's base body, as Marvel goes on to explicitly state that this is only in reference to Thor's corporeal state and not something soteriological or mathematical or dimensional like spiritual transcendence, meaning a base Thor would be beyond all mathematical notions of space, time, and dimensions, including time and space, and many, many more. However, Thor's real and impressive feats comes in the 2012 Thor God of Thunder comic run when Thor fights against a being known as Gorr. Gorr was a vengeful galactic killer, being hailed and titled as the God Butcher. Once a devoted and peaceful man, Gorr lost his faith after the death of his daughter, and lost his faith in the gods, and now sought the extinction of all gods because of this. In doing that, this Gorr becomes one with existence, being the totality of infinity. After slaying the majority of the Asgardian pantheon, including Odin, which I'll get into, fights against that of an unworthy Thor. This unworthy Thor was so actually skilled to the point where not only did Gorr claim that Thor was skilled, but thought that he was extremely well versed in the art of combat. Gorr even fights relative to this average unworthy Thor, to where the narrator claims it took hours for either combatant to fall, insinuating it was a pitched extreme difficulty fight. The reason this is an impressive feat for a base unworthy Thor is because, as said prior, Gorr not only defeated the three Thors, but Loki. Old King Thor had the Odin Force longer than that of Odin, and mind you, this would mean that all feats I mentioned prior pale in comparison to that version of Thor, which this unworthy Thor would now scale above. Even with all the impressive feats the three Thors have, they all pair in comparison to a necro god Loki, whom Gorr also defeated. Keep in mind, necro god Loki in his battle with Thor destroyed the omnipotent city, which I'll get into later. However, in that same battle, Loki flat out admits that he was confident he would have killed and not only beaten Thor, but would have died himself to Gorr. Even then, the Thor that had a pitched battle with Gorr does manage to beat Gorr and remove the Necro Sword from him using something called the God Bomb, and then absorbing it into himself. The God Bomb, once detonated, affects the entire multiverse on levels, killing every god in every moment of their life, and even the omnipotent city is affected, which is stated to be the nexus of all gods in Marvel. We know this to be true, as like I said prior, Gorr combined with all of existence, so it makes complete and total sense as to why the totality of the multiverse was affected. In terms of hacks and abilities, Thor later on within his many comic book runs basically pulls a page from Gorr and flat out becomes one with the universe and becomes nigh omnipresent. Omnipresence is defined as being nowhere and everywhere in tandem with each other, almost like a true dichotomy or contradiction. Not only, and I'm not joking, with a single wave of his hand could erase Superman from existence entirely, beyond things such as his concepts and his soul, casually using that of the Odin Force. Now that the stats are laid out, we can now answer the question of, is Superman versus Thor close? And the answer is no. On paper, it may seem like a match made in heaven, as shown as base Superman versus a base Thor isn't really fair to Superman like at all, and Superman would probably get one-shotted, with Superman's best chance being adapting to Thor before he's inevitably defeated. However, even then, it's a very, very slim chance. However, this is for a base Thor versus base Superman. If we were to maybe say a Cosmic King Thor versus a Cosmic Armored Superman, this fight drastically changes, as Thor and Superman no longer get their power from their biology, but from the power of hope and Galactus. I'll start with Thor first, since his scaling is a bit easier to comprehend and scale. The Thor Volume 6 that came out in 2020, Thor fights a weakened, hungry Galactus. Keep in mind, Galactus is equal and relative to that as Odin, as they have fought many times in the past. For some context on how strong Galactus is stated to be the only one of the entire multiverse to be able to stand up to the Black Winter, including this same Thor, that same Gorr, Necro King Loki, and a base Thor, as well as the unworthy base Thor that fought Gorr, and many, many more. With Thor himself, before he transformed into Cosmic King Thor, saying that Galactus is their only hope. Keep in mind, this is a Thor who had already beaten Gorr and Loki, and had already attained the Odin Force. This Galactus does also scale to the Black Winter pretty blatantly, and is even above it, as I'll get into later. This weakened Galactus is then amped by the majority of the literal 5 greatest powers in the entire multiverse, and now has the power to at least contend against the Black Winter. But before Galactus is able to achieve his hypothetical peak in this form, he would be stopped by Thor. In their fight, Galactus tanks Thor's entire God Blast, which even Thor himself has regarded to be the totality of his power, in this case including the power Cosmic, which he attained from Galactus. Thor then with all of his might is able to push back Galactus, who in his own words is stronger than he has ever been, including all of his previous fights, the prior versions of himself, the Avengers, and even his fights against that of the All-Father himself, Odin. Thor, bearing that statement in mind, beats this version of Galactus and uses the literal totality of his power to tank the Black Winter in its entirety, which scales above the multiverse, whom Galactus was stated to scale above. For reference as to how strong the power Cosmic is, which is the power gifted to Thor by Galactus, the power Cosmic is a primary substance of omniscience and omnipresence. It is the collapse of space and time into a singular energy, the removal of boundaries between dimensions, which is of course true, as Galactus is stated to have no dimensions and to not have any concept of boundaries at all, which Thor scales above in almost its entirety. Cosmic Armor Superman, or the Thought Robot, only appears in 2 issues in Final Crisis, those being Superman Beyond issues 1 and 2. In the beginning of the storyline, Zilovala, a monitor, beings who exist outside the multiverse and view the multiverse as germs or as a 2-dimensional fictional world in the words of Captain Atom. Monitors, as they are called, monitor the universe to prevent crises such as the one that happens in these issues. Superman also shows up as he is desperate to do anything to prevent Lois Lane from being on the cusp of death, to propose a deal to save all of existence from the ultimate evil, which I'll get into, in exchange for the Bleed, a higher dimensional substance medicine that can help save Lois, and also the other higher dimensional space between the universes. However, during the events of Final Crisis, a being known as Mandrak would rise and threaten the very existence of the DC multiverse, in which to combat this, Ultraman and Superman would fuse symmetries and activated the Thought Robot in Nile, a place within the Monitor Sphere, a primal realm that transcends Limbo, to defeat the ultimate evil Mandrak once and for all. When the Thought Robot known as Cosmic Armor Superman awakens, not only is he aware of the reader reading the story, but also viewed Limbo, a place that transcends not only the multiverse, but the sphere of the gods on a conceptual level, as 2D or fictional. As for speed, both variants before having their symmetries fused have their own set of immeasurable speed feats, and with this amp this massive, the concept of distance or speed should logically be irrelevant to Superman, as Superman not only just breaks the formula noted for speed, but is beyond the concepts of space and time inherently. Cosmic Armor Superman is also explicitly stated to adapt to any threat. This is not a hyperbole, nor am I trying to delve into the limits of a no limits fallacy whatsoever, as within his fight against Mandrak, he literally displayed reactive evolution, constantly getting stronger as Mandrak was getting stronger as well. He can also tank the heat of 10 billion suns and the blood of 52 universes, meaning he's striking him with full power, or with the full power of a higher dimensional substance, and these 52 universes are all infinite in size. This is also not conventional adaptation like the powerhouses you see in Battle Shonen, i.e. Broly or Kenpachi. This is more akin to plot manipulation resistance and conceptual territory, as he felt the story itself reassembling itself in Mandrak's favor, and he still came out on top of the fight, casting him to the Overvoid and almost killing him. This is also where this concept of hope I mentioned prior really comes into fruition. As the author says himself in reference to this power of hope, so long as hope exists, Superman will exist, and so long as Superman exists, hope will exist. Superman is the embodiment of hope, as is hope. Hope is the embodiment of Superman. So with all the scaling provided and the stats laid out, it's sort of like blatantly obvious that Cosmic King Thor falls to that of this version of Superman, as even though the power Cosmic is stated to be the source of all omnipotent and omniscient powers, the statement is more akin to hyperbolic or archaic language in reference to gods within Marvel. Some other win conditions for Superman being out-haxing Thor via reactive level evolution. If this happens, which it will, Thor has no hope of countering this, and it's not debatable. There's no argument to be had, as not only do Thor and Superman have relative power, meaning Superman wouldn't just get one-shotted by Thor or vice versa, but Superman would not think of any fear Thor could exploit in this form, as he is the literal essence of Superman, good and hope. The other win conditions for Superman would be to simply win the conventional fight due to overpowering him with little to no difficulty, as Superman has shown on countless occasions to have superior physical strength than that of Thor, even within the DC and Marvel crossover comic, which is indeed canon. I hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe, as it would mean a lot. A lot of time, effort, and research was put into this video alone, and I would really appreciate it. However, with that being said, be sure to stay safe. Be sure to have a nice rest of your day or night, and till next time.